Imagine this. You're just doing something ordinary, cleaning up your room, when out of nowhere, your grandson walks in and shuts the door. You're not expecting anything unusual, but what happens next will stay with you forever. Have you ever had a moment that completely changed everything, even when it seemed like just another day? Let's dive into Donna's story, a woman who's about to find out how even the quietest moments can carry the weight of unspoken truths. From a small room to a deeper connection, this story will take you on an emotional journey you won't forget. By the way, let me know where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers across the U.S. I was cleaning my room when I heard the familiar sound of footsteps coming down the hall. It was late in the afternoon, and the sun was already starting to dip behind the trees, casting a soft glow through my window. My hands moved automatically, folding a sweater, tidying up the clutter that had gathered over the week. I wasn't expecting anyone. At least, not for another hour or so. The door creaked open, and I looked up, a little startled. It was Paul, my grandson. He had this way of walking that always made me smile. Quick, but somehow light on his feet, like he had somewhere he needed to be but didn't want to rush. "Hey, Grandma," he said, his voice warm and easy, the same as it had always been. He was grown now, but I still thought of him as that little boy who used to chase me around the yard. His face, though older, still held the same boyish charm, the same kindness in his eyes. There was no mistaking the way he looked at me, like I was the one person who had all the answers. "Hey, Paul," I replied, brushing my hands off on the sides of my jeans. "What's up?" He didn't say anything at first, just stood there for a moment, his hand on the door handle. And then, without warning, he shut it behind him. The click of the door locking in place was so sudden, it made my heart skip a beat. I raised an eyebrow, confused. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a few steps into the room, his eyes scanning the space as if he was seeing it for the first time. It was strange, the way he looked at the room, almost like he was searching for something. His gaze landed on me, and for the first time in a while, I noticed how much he had changed. His shoulders were broader now, his jawline more defined. But his eyes, those eyes were still the same. There was something there, something that caught me off guard. "Yeah, everything's fine," he said, finally speaking again. "I just needed to talk. Can we sit for a minute?" I nodded, motioning to the chair next to my bed. "Of course. Sit down. What's on your mind?" He hesitated for a moment, his hands shoved into the pockets of his hoodie. I could tell he was working through something that weighed on him. I had seen this look on his face before when he was younger, but back then it was always something simple. A school project gone wrong, a broken toy. But this time, I could tell it was different. He sat down, the silence hanging between us for a few moments. I didn't rush him. I knew he'd speak when he was ready. We had always had that kind of relationship, one where words weren't needed as much as understanding. "You ever think about things?" He started slowly. "About life and how things end up the way they do." I tilted my head, intrigued by the way he phrased it. "I think about a lot of things," I said softly, settling down on the edge of my bed. "But why do you ask?" He looked at me for a long moment, his brow furrowed. It was like he was trying to find the right words to explain what he was feeling. And as he sat there, I could sense that this was something important, something that had been building inside him for a while. "I don't know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I guess I'm just confused, you know. I've been feeling this weight on me, and I don't know how to shake it off. Like, everything's changing so fast, and I don't know where I fit in all of it." I let his words settle for a moment. I had seen Paul go through his phases. Every young man does. But there was something different in his tone this time. It wasn't just confusion. It was a kind of desperation. A need for understanding, something he couldn't find in his friends or his own mind. I took a deep breath and sat back, gathering my thoughts. I wasn't sure where this conversation was headed, but I knew I had to meet him where he was. "You know, Paul," I began, my voice steady, "life does have a way of throwing things at you when you least expect it. It can be overwhelming, and sometimes you feel like you're just treading water. But I'll tell you one thing, you're never alone in this. You're always going to have people who care about you, who want to help you find your way." He looked up at me, his expression softening a little, like he was trying to take in what I was saying. "Yeah, but I don't know if I'm ready for all this. All the changes, all the responsibilities." I reached out and placed my hand gently on his. "Nobody ever is," I said quietly. "But the key is to just take it one step at a time. You don't have to have all the answers right now. What matters is that you're here, and you're figuring it out. And I'm right here with you." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw that childlike trust in his eyes again. It made my heart ache a little, knowing how much he had grown up and how much I wanted to protect him from the world's harsh realities. The room felt quieter now, the weight of his words hanging in the air. I didn't know what had brought him here, or what he was really searching for, but I knew one thing for sure. This moment, this quiet exchange, was something we both needed. I took a deep breath, the silence wrapping around us like a blanket, and said, "You don't have to carry it all by yourself, Paul. You've got me. Always." He nodded slowly, his hand still resting in mine, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. What happened next was something I never expected. The silence lingered between us for a moment longer, the kind of silence that only happens when something unspoken hangs heavy in the air. My heart still ached with the weight of Paul's words, the quiet desperation that I hadn't known he was carrying. He hadn't looked at me like that before, not in years, not since he was a little boy, needing guidance and comfort. But now, as an adult, he seemed so different, so much more complicated. Yet he was still my grandson, and I wasn't going to let him carry this burden alone. "Grandma," Paul said suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was softer than before, almost hesitant. "There's something I've been thinking about, something I've wanted to ask you, but I wasn't sure how. I feel like I need to know more about you, about what you've gone through in your life." I blinked, surprised by his words. "Me?" I said, my voice betraying a hint of confusion. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," he said, running a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he had when he was trying to put his thoughts into words. "I guess I've always seen you as, well, Grandma, you know. The person who's always there with advice, with love, with everything. But I don't know much about you. About your life before I was born, what you went through, who you were when you were my age." His question caught me off guard. No one had ever asked me that before. It was strange to think of myself outside of the role I had played in his life for so long. A mother, a grandmother, a listener, a guide, but never really a person in my own right, with my own story to tell. I sat back, trying to find the words. It wasn't easy. You see, when you've lived as long as I have, the past is a place that's hard to return to. It's filled with memories, some beautiful, others painful, and all of them tucked away carefully, like precious keepsakes. But when he looked at me with those searching eyes, I knew it was time. Time to share a piece of myself that I had kept hidden for so long. "I guess I can tell you some things," I said slowly, the words coming with a weight I hadn't expected. "It's not always easy to talk about the past, you know, but I'll try." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes wide, eager to hear more. I could tell he wanted to understand, to truly know me, not just as his grandmother, but as the woman I had once been. I took a deep breath and began. When I was your age, I said, my voice quieter now, I had big dreams, just like you. I thought I had my whole life ahead of me. I wasn't any different from you, Paul. I thought I knew exactly what I wanted. I paused for a moment, allowing the memories to surface. I could almost feel the young woman I had once been, standing on the brink of everything, full of hope and excitement. It felt strange to think back on those days. I married young, I continued, my voice softening with the memory. I was in love, or at least I thought I was. I thought love would make everything fall into place. But it didn't, not the way I imagined. Life doesn't work like that, Paul. Sometimes you realize that love isn't enough to hold things together. Paul stayed silent, listening intently. I could see him trying to piece the puzzle together, trying to understand me in a way that was different from the way he had always known me. I had to learn some tough lessons, I said, my voice tinged with a mixture of nostalgia and regret. I learned that sometimes the people you trust the most can hurt you the deepest. I didn't always make the right choices. There were times when I thought I was doing everything right, and still, things fell apart. I could feel the tears threatening, but I fought them back. It wasn't for me to cry now. This moment wasn't about my pain. It was about him understanding that the struggles he was facing were a part of something much bigger, a part of life itself. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I continued, wiping a stray tear from my cheek, life isn't easy. It's messy. And it doesn't always make sense. But you learn to keep going, even when it hurts. Even when you feel like you're not sure what's next. Because there's always something next. And there's always someone there for you. Paul was quiet for a long time after that. His gaze had softened, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. He wasn't just hearing my story. He was connecting with it, understanding that the pain and the confusion he felt now wasn't something unique to him. We all go through it in different ways, at different times. Grandma, he said finally, his voice filled with a new kind of warmth. I never knew that. I always thought you had everything figured out. I guess I didn't realize how much you've been through. I nodded, my heart swelling with both pride and sadness. We all go through things, Paul. The important thing is that you don't face it alone. And you don't have to carry everything by yourself. No matter what happens, you have people who care about you. You've got me. He smiled, a slow, genuine smile that made my heart skip a beat. I'm glad I have you, Grandma. You don't know how much that means to me. For a moment, the world outside my room seemed to disappear. It was just Paul and me, two people, bridging the gap between the past and the present, finding a deeper connection than we had ever shared before. Thank you for sharing that with me, he said, his voice steady, yet filled with emotion. I think I understand a little more now. About you, about life. I smiled softly, squeezing his hand gently. You don't need to thank me, sweetheart. We're family. That's what we're here for. There was a quiet understanding between us now. The weight of his questions had lifted, replaced by a sense of peace, a sense of connection that hadn't been there before. It was as though, in that moment, we had both found something important, something we had been missing all along. Paul stood up, his shoulders a little lighter than they had been when he first entered the room. I should probably go, but thanks, Grandma. I really needed this. I nodded, watching him as he reached for the door. But before he left, he turned to face me once more, his expression soft and genuine. I love you, he said simply. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of those words in my chest, a warmth that spread through me, a comfort I hadn't known I needed. "I love you too, Paul," I replied, my voice steady, filled with the kind of truth that only comes with time. He smiled again and left the room, the door clicking shut behind him. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because for that brief moment we had shared something real, something that would stay with us, even when the world outside felt too big, too complicated. It wasn't the end of anything. No, it was the beginning. A new chapter. The next few days passed in a blur, the kind of quiet that often follows after an intense conversation. I found myself thinking back on that moment with Paul more than I expected. The way he had looked at me, the way he listened as I shared pieces of myself that had been buried for so long. It wasn't easy, talking about things I hadn't revisited in decades, but it felt freeing, in a way. It was strange, though, how much that conversation had shifted something inside me. I'd always thought of myself as someone who was meant to take care of others, to be the strong one in the family. But after that night, it was like I was seeing myself in a new light, like I wasn't just the grandma or the mom who had it all together. I was Donna, a woman who had lived a life, made choices, learned lessons, and had stories of her own. But life, as it always does, had a way of nudging us back into the grind of the everyday. And so I went back to my routine, organizing, cleaning, cooking. It was a comfort, really. The little things, the ordinary things, were what kept me grounded. Still, every so often, I'd find myself staring out the window, wondering where Paul was. Wondering if he was okay. I hadn't heard from him in a couple of days, and I found myself missing him, missing that connection we had shared. Then, late one afternoon, as I was sorting through some old photographs, I heard the familiar sound of footsteps outside my door again. This time, it wasn't the light shuffle of Paul's usual entrance. It was heavier, more deliberate, like someone was trying to make their presence known. Before I could get up to see who it was, the door opened slightly, just a crack. Then it swung wide, and there he was, Paul, standing there with a look on his face that was a mixture of uncertainty and determination. "Hey, Grandma," he said, his voice low but filled with that familiar warmth I always loved. But there was something in his eyes, a storm that hadn't been there before. I sat back on the bed, setting the photos aside. "Hey, Paul, everything okay?" He nodded, but it didn't feel like a real answer. He stepped inside the room, but he didn't close the door behind him like last time. Instead, he left it slightly ajar, like he wasn't sure if he was ready to be fully enclosed in this space with me again. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, looking down at the floor, as though the weight of his thoughts was pressing down on him. "About everything we talked about the other night. About you. About what you said." I smiled gently, trying to ease the tension. "It's a lot, I know. Sometimes it's hard to face the past. But it's part of who we are, Paul. We carry it with us, whether we like it or not." He met my gaze then, his eyes searching mine, like he was looking for something I couldn't quite place. "I know, Grandma. And I've been thinking, maybe it's time I faced my own past." I raised an eyebrow, a little surprised. "What do you mean?" Paul took a deep breath, and for a moment he seemed to hesitate, like he was debating whether or not to share something with me that he wasn't sure he was ready to talk about. "Some stuff happened," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some things I've been carrying around. I thought I could just push it aside, forget about it, but it's been eating at me. I've been running from it for so long, and I don't know what to do with it anymore." I watched him carefully, my heart tightening. Whatever this was, it clearly wasn't something small. It was something important, something that had been festering inside him. "Paul," I said softly, my voice filled with concern, "you don't have to carry this on your own. You know that, right?" He nodded, but there was still a distance between us. He hadn't fully opened up yet. I could tell he was afraid of what sharing his burden might mean, afraid of what it would change. "Can I tell you something?" he asked, his voice shaking just slightly. "Something I've never told anyone before." I felt my heart stop for a moment. This was different from the conversation we had before. This wasn't just about life lessons or regrets. This was something deeper, something hidden. "Of course, Paul," I said, my tone gentle, giving him the space to speak. "Whatever it is, you can tell me. I'm here." He took another breath, this one shaky, like he was preparing himself to say something that might hurt. And then he spoke, his words hanging heavy in the air. "When I was younger," he began, "there were things that happened in the family, things that I didn't understand at the time. But as I've gotten older, I started to see things differently. I started to realize how much pain was caused by things people never talked about." He paused, his hands wringing together nervously, like he was trying to make sense of his own thoughts. "I never really understood why my dad left," he said, his voice quiet, barely above a whisper. "It's like he just disappeared. And for the longest time, I thought it was my fault, that I did something to make him leave. I've carried that with me for so long, and I never told anyone because I didn't think anyone would understand. But now, I think it's time I faced it." My heart broke for him in that moment. I could feel the pain in his words, the hurt that had festered inside him for so long, without anyone to help him process it. It wasn't just confusion. It was a deep, unspoken wound. "You're not alone in this, Paul," I said softly, my voice steady but filled with empathy. "I know it's been hard, and I can't tell you how sorry I am for what you've been through. But I want you to know something. It wasn't your fault. Whatever happened, it wasn't because of you." Tears welled up in his eyes, and for a moment I thought he might break down right there. But instead, he wiped them away quickly, trying to maintain his composure. "I just didn't know how to let go of that guilt," he admitted. "And I think that's what's been holding me back all these years." "You don't need to hold on to that guilt anymore, Paul," I said firmly. "It's not yours to carry. You're allowed to move forward. You're allowed to heal. We all are." We sat there in silence for a long moment, the weight of his confession hanging between us. It was a raw moment, one that I knew would change both of us forever. In that room, we weren't just grandmother and grandson anymore. We were two people connected by the shared experience of carrying burdens we hadn't known how to carry before. "I'm sorry," Paul said finally, his voice thick with emotion. I didn't know how to say it." I shook my head gently. "You don't have to apologize. I'm proud of you, Paul, for facing this, for sharing it with me. And I want you to know, no matter what happens, I'm always here for you." He nodded, a quiet smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Thanks, Grandma. I think I can start letting go now." And in that moment, I felt like we both had. Letting go of the past wasn't easy, but it was a start, the beginning of something new, something filled with hope, understanding, and the promise of healing. As Paul stood to leave, he paused at the door, glancing back at me. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, Paul," I replied, my voice steady, filled with a love that spoke volumes. And with that, he left the room, leaving me with a heart full of peace and a soul lighter than it had been in years. Because sometimes facing the past together is the only way to truly move forward.